Welcome to Studio One-on-One on Hornet Radio. I'm Lily Mashburn, and today I'm here with Phung Huynh, who has an art exhibition here at Fullerton College. Would you like to tell us more about your art exhibition?
Sure. Thank you, Lily. Thank you for interviewing me today. So the Fullerton Art Gallery has an exhibition of my work that I've been working on for the last few years. And part of that exhibition includes an artist in residency program. So the art department is incredible. They have this opportunity to invite an artist every year to have an exhibition and to be set up in one of the classrooms to use as a studio for a week so students can come by and ask questions and engage with the artist. And I also did a limited edition print with the art department about Buddhism and about the looting and violence of Buddha statues and the decapitation of such statues.
And along with that, I know the title, Life in Many Worlds, is, yes, the title of this, and it's very powerful. And I was just wondering, why did you choose this?
Thank you so much. So Jasmine McNeil, who teaches in the art department, museum studies, she curated the show. And before we had the idea for the show, she interviewed me and we had many discussions, and I just, shared about my experience being a Southeast Asian refugee and my artwork, and she actually came up with the title and wrote the text, which I felt was really thoughtful and sensitive. So just a little bit of background. I'm a Southeast Asian refugee. My father is Cambodian, and he left Cambodia in the 1970s because of genocide and civil war. And so in 1975, he rode his bike across the border to Vietnam, where he sought refuge. And that's where my mother and I were both born. So my background is Cambodian, Vietnamese with Chinese ancestry. And so the Life in Many Worlds alludes to that multi-ethnic heritage and background. And my father took my whole family to a Thai refugee camp, and we eventually resettled in the United States. So the Life in Many Worlds, I think, deals with being a refugee, being displaced, and then having to make new homes. We first resettled in Michigan and then in Los Angeles. So I think a lot of that has to do with that experience, having to make life in many, many different environments every time we moved.
And I know along with being a refugee and coming here to America, a lot of times people talk about erasure and assimilation. Why is it important to highlight these topics instead of just ignoring them?
That's such a good question, Lily. Thank you. Cultural erasure is really important in my work because as an artist, I'm a cultural bearer. And so I'm trying to highlight things that are at risk or not represented or, like you said, being erased. So as I mentioned, my father's from Cambodia, and during the genocide between 1975 and 1979, 90% of artists were killed or died of forced labor and starvation. And so when I say 90% of artists, these are cultural bearers, right? These are artists who carry generations of music, of painting, sculpture, dance. And so for me, I feel like it's a privilege and almost a responsibility to be an artist and to preserve that cultural lineage of art and also situate ourselves here in the contemporary present space. So there's that aspect of cultural erasure. And as you mentioned, for people who are displaced and come, in our case, to the United States, when you're assimilating, right, when you're learning the language of your resettled homeland, you unfortunately have to put your mother tongue and culture in the back burner. And sometimes some parents choose to completely not teach it because they're worried about their children not assimilating, being made fun of, not having opportunities. So I think that's such a great question, and I feel like, in my work I do address those kinds of erasures from displacement, from genocide, and also assimilation.
And part of this exhibition, is there a specific piece or two that you really hope students or other people, because I know you're an educator, that they take with them and they know we don't need to erase our history, that we can be proud of it?
Thank you. I'm thinking of the painting as you walk into the gallery and you turn around. There's a painting on the freestanding wall, and it's called Cambodian American. And I feel like it deals with all these things that we're talking about, displacement, assimilation, and diaspora. So I was commissioned by the Department of Education in California to make an artwork that represents Cambodian American studies. A bill was passed in, I think, 2018 to include more Southeast Asian American history. I mean, as you probably remember, when you learn U.S. history, anytime you learn about Asian American history, you learn about the concentration camps of the Japanese Americans and maybe the Chinese working on the railroads, and that was it, you know?
Yeah.
And so California passed a bill like, no, we need to acknowledge Hmong, Vietnamese, you know, Cambodian, Lao people, and really flesh out and expand the Asian American history and experience. And so I feel really honored I got to make the artwork that represents what Cambodian American history would look like for public education and curriculum from K through 12. And so if you look at that painting, I try to highlight different things in the background. Is Angkor Wat, which is kind of like the Athens for Cambodia. Mm-hmm. It's a very ancient temple that is a World Heritage Site. It's over 1,000 years old, and it's on the Cambodian flag. So I have that like as a silvery temple in the background. And then as you move from the background to the foreground, you'll see little girls in labor camps, and that's acknowledging the Khmer Rouge genocide and regime without, you know, really gory or violent images, because that could be re-traumatizing and harmful. Because the Cambodian American experience is tied to displacement because of the genocide and war, so it has to be acknowledged. And in the foreground, you'll see like a lotus sort of container with incense, and it references Cambodian heritage that honors ancestry, and I feel like it also honors those who have died and those we want to remember. And on the far right is Mia Lath, who is a celebrated Cambodian American dancer who preserves classical Cambodian dance in Southern California and even, you know, throughout the United States. And I love that. And that like emphasizes we refuse to be erased. We refuse for our art form to be erased. And then on the far left, I like this idea of, you know, Cambodians are international and we're very contemporary. So I have two musicians from the golden age of rock and roll in the 60s and 70s in Cambodia. So Sin Sisamuth, who's like the Elvis of Cambodia, and Rose Saray Sotia, who's like the Diana Ross of Cambodia. And, you know, you can go on Spotify and listen to their music, and I just really love that. And at one point, Cambodia was known as the Pearl of Southeast Asia because it was so metropolitan. It was vibrant. There was like, yeah, rock and roll and the integration of Latin music. And so there's like a shell with pearls coming out. And so it has like all these different vignettes that I wanted to represent what Cambodian American identity is.
So because you include all of that and you know the history so well, I wonder, is this something you knew growing up from like your family, or is this something that over time you've had to find out on your own?
That's such a great question. More finding out on my own, because a lot of people who have experienced incredible, like trauma, right? Like war and genocide, there's a lot of silence in the home. There's inherited trauma. And so I couldn't outright ask my parents about those experiences. It came up when they were willing to share it, or it would come up when we're praying to our ancestors, or it would come up when we're eating, right? So I'm trying to like piece together a very fragmented historical experience. And I feel like a lot of the stories that my grandparents and parents were passing down and their experiences were not written in the history books that I was learning here in the United States. And so I had to like really dig deep. And I feel that since 2020 and the BLM movement and anti-racist movement, there was, this wanting to reckon with white supremacy and to reckon with harm in history and to look at histories that are not written by dominant culture and white historians. And so it took me over 20 years to really understand what Cambodian history is and was, and what the Cambodian American experience is.
I can somewhat relate to that. I'm half Japanese, and I didn't even learn about my own culture, really, about how my grandpa grew up in, like you said, concentration camp and internment camp. But learning through like ethnic studies in college and other like searching on your own, I feel like, right, you have to be the person to put forward like I want to learn about my own history, and I feel like your own art helps other people be inspired to do that.
Thank you. Did you ask your grandparents about that history?
I kind of got to ask my grandma about that, but unfortunately my grandfather passed away when I was younger. So, but being able to even ask her about that kind of like made me feel better about like my own past and like who I am as someone who is part Asian. So, but yeah, I feel like you're very inspiring because of your work. And
Thank you.
part of what you were talking about, history, I know a huge component of your art, or what people really recognize, is your pieces with the donut box, the pink donut box. Would you like to expand on why choose that?
Yeah. I think the pink donut box is a really interesting physical thing to make art on. Like no one, you think about painting on a canvas or drawing on archival paper, but I love this idea that it's a throwaway thing. And also, in addition to that, and that it's a physically, visually interesting object, is that it is symbolic of the Cambodian American experience. Because like close to 90% of donut shops in California are mom and pop donut shops owned by Cambodian refugees, immigrants, and Cambodian Americans. And so what really inspired me to make this work was during Trump's first administration, a colleague of mine saw an LA Times article about, why are there pink donut boxes, is like linking this to Cambodian refugee experience. And I thought, well, I know that. Like, I grew up with this, right? And it did two things. Number one, it made me feel like I'm tired of seeing my community story written by others who didn't live it. And this is a great time to make art about it. And it was a great time to make art that resisted demonizing violent narratives about immigrants that Trump was perpetuating, that had like real consequences. And so that's what spearheaded this series of pink donut box drawings and prints.
Do you have a favorite donut shop owned by Cambodian families, or anything from your own history that you remember going to?
Okay, they didn't pay me to say that.
Yeah.
The one that I love is in my neighborhood. It's called Monterey Donuts.
Mm-hmm.
It's on the border of South Pasadena, Herman, and El Sereno. And I love this woman so much. Everyone calls her Miss Lee, and she's a survivor of the genocide, survived cancer, and she doesn't have a license. I remember, why don't you, Bong. Bong is an honorific for people older than you in Khmer. She's like, I'm so traumatized by the things that I experienced in genocide. For some reason, driving and getting a license triggers me. But she put 4 kids through college, through that donut shop.
Oh my God.
And I love how it's very simple. It's just glaze, your classics, like your glaze, your, was it cake donut?
Yeah,
right?
cake donuts.
Yeah, your bear claw.
Yeah.
And she speaks Spanish better than English because most of her customers speak Spanish. And I love that. I'm like, that's a great assimilation story. I'm like, that's the American story, right? Especially in Southern California. And then the other donut shop I really love, it's called Colorado Donuts in Eagle Rock. And I love it because it's intergenerational. Like the kids took over and like try to make it more hip and relatable to now, and it's on Instagram. But the flavors, like matcha green tea, horchata, just expanding on the flavors of the donut that's more representational of the cultural tapestry of Southern California. So yeah, those are my 2 favorites.
I feel like what you're saying too about, I feel like immigrants can bring a new spin to many things that are already here, but also bring their own culture to, the United States and even other countries, because of course immigrants don't just come to America. I feel like a lot of people love to talk about like, what's going on here, but so many other countries exist where people move and they bring their culture and create new culture within that. So what do you think, or why would you recommend people who have never been to a Cambodian donut shop or any other places owned by immigrants, why would you recommend people go there?
Cambodians are the nicest people in the world, and I just think like after surviving incredibly traumatic experiences such as genocide and war violence, to be in a donut shop and still put a smile on your face, right? And it's kind of sad in ways that people go and do people know what the donut shop owner has really gone through to be here? But the exchange, right? Like, who doesn't like a donut, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who doesn't like to go and smell it and like start your day that way? So I really, really love that part. But I'm an anti-capitalist, right? I'm very, my work is about resisting U.S. imperialism. So the fact that, we see places like Starbucks, chain places take over small family-owned businesses, for me, the Cambodian-owned donut shop represents those small businesses and the family, and so when you go to a donut shop, it's more than just buying a donut. You're supporting a small business, you're supporting a family-owned business, you're supporting an immigrant, why would you want to go to Winchell's?
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, most of the time it's better at actual immigrant-owned places anyways, right?
Yes.
They put their love into it, not just corporate-owned, like, oh, let's put out a couple donuts to make more money.
Yeah.
But I love to see that reflected in your work, and also you making that work supports those same businesses. And part of that is making multimedia artwork. What other formats have you used, and why do you think it's important to not just, say, paint on a canvas?
Thank you for that. I think as an artist, it is the artist's responsibility to activate the work, like not just to make it and it's displayed, but what kinds of things am I doing? For example, sitting here with you, right, and talking about it, and you're giving me the opportunity to share my story, and that's going to be disseminated. That's activating the work. Or earlier today, I sat with students in the gallery and shared about my work. I'm an educator, community activist, so there's different ways that I think it's important for artists to not just make a work and expect it to be autonomous, but that we have a responsibility to share about it. So another practice that I have is public art. Currently I'm working on a metro station right now, so making work that anybody can have access to, and you don't have to buy it in a gallery, but like you can experience it and it's out in the public. That's a really important practice for me too.
You said that now, and also I heard in a past interview, you said it's important that art is not just shown in, say, high-end like museums or other places like that. Where else would you hope to put your art into that's maybe not so typical or expected?
I've always wanted to make an animated film, and I like this idea of, number one, it expands my practice into something that's more engaging. And it's a form of storytelling that's very, that engages sound, engages, your visual sensibilities, but that, it could be distributed anywhere and anybody could have it. So that's kind of like my dream.
That's amazing. And also part of that accessibility is fighting against capitalism and being told, no, you can only pay $24.99 a month to watch it on the streaming platform, right? You can access it anywhere, and that means most of anyone can see it too, which I think is amazing in spreading stories. Also talking about your exhibit pieces, right? The donut box. Why also the tapestries that you have? For the banners.
Yes, thank you. That's such a great question. So I did a series of works about repatriation, that is returning artworks to the original country. And so because, first colonialism, when the French colonized Cambodia, they were taking art from the art, but it's like our ancestors and our gods, right? Like statues, taking it back to France, they're in the Louvre. And then when the Americans fought the wars in Southeast Asia, there was more looting. And finally, the Khmer Rouge genocide during the 70s made Cambodia so vulnerable that it was easy for looters to cut the heads of statues and smuggle it to Thailand and sell it in the black market. We ask, why not take the whole statue? The whole statue is huge. You can't sneak that in, but if you cut the head, it's easy to smuggle, but you're decapitating a god. And now a lot of these heads and fragments are in museums in the United States and in Europe. And when I return to Cambodia and go to these sacred ancient temples, you'll see a lot of headless Buddhas and deities. And so if you look at the tapestries hanging, they kind of look like funerary banners, and they're kind of like apparitions or like ghosts. Like that's the kind of feeling that I want. And so you'll see the drawings that I did of the original heads with a gold frame that represents or kind of references museums. And then you'll see the headless bodies kind of floating. And so that's what I'm trying to call attention to: the violence of looting, the call for repatriation, but also that museums take away cultural heritage and functions of what we would, consider our gods and our ancestors.
Another part of, I remember you saying that when you were about to do this, that you could make a couple requests about what you wanted to have there on the opening or during the time that your art is spent here. What were some of those requests and why?
Lily, you asked such really good questions. I'm so excited about this. All right, calm down now.
Thank you.
The art department team is incredible. I think everybody from Regina, who's the department coordinator, making sure I know where to go, I have my rooms, Jasmine McNeil, who's the curator and teaches there, Carol Henke, who is in charge of collections, Jaime Perez, who teaches art history, who invited me here, and Seha, who manages and directs and takes care of the gallery. I mean, really generous. Yeah, I feel really privileged and grateful, that they're like, we appreciate your work, we value your work. I mean, every artist wants that, right? So I told them, okay, in addition to the exhibition and the residency, I really want to have classical Cambodian dancers come and dance. Because as I mentioned, during the genocide of the 70s, 90% of artists were killed, right? And so with classical Cambodian dance, the last surviving master dancers were teaching it at refugee camps. And in the diaspora, we're trying to preserve and learn it. And these are thousands of year old dances that tell the story of Cambodian people. And they figured it out. They found the funds, and the classical Cambodian dancers came. They did a blessing dance, so bless the space, bless the people who came. And then they did the second dance, which talks about the origin stories of how Cambodia came about, which is an Indian prince sailed to what is now Cambodia and fell in love with a Naga princess, which is a snake princess who lives under the water. And they fell in love, and they, had children, and that's the origin myths of Cambodia. So I felt like it was so beautiful to be able to have the dancers do that. And then the second thing was I wanted to raise awareness about the decapitation of Buddha heads and how it's normalized in the West. People buy Buddha heads and decorate their homes. I'm like, that's wrong, right? Do you want me to decorate my house with a Jesus head? Right? And so outside the gallery, you'll see a display case with different kinds of commercialized Buddha heads. And I did a write-up about returning the body to Buddha. And so with Todd Smith, who teaches printmaking here, we did a limited edition series where I drew the Naga Buddha, which is very unique to Cambodia. It's Buddha meditating, and this the Naga, which is a 5 or 7-headed snake, forms a canopy to protect Buddha from the rain while he meditates. I love that image. And so I made a print, and we printed it in gold to, number one, raise the awareness of making sure Buddha's body is whole, raising awareness about repatriation and looting and decapitation, but also making it accessible. So as an artist, I have a gallery. I can't make up prices. I have to talk to my gallery about the value of my work. And so it's valued at $500 a print, but I said, but here, please discount it as much as you want so that students and faculty, whoever wants the print, can have it, and then the proceeds would go back to the program. And so when we made the print, half the prints I kept and half the prints the art department kept, so that it has this multifunctional purpose.
For anyone who wants to purchase one of those, how would they go about doing that? Do they just go there to the exhibit, or how would they do that?
They would contact the Fullerton College Art Gallery, and they have an Instagram that you can go to, and somebody would get back to you. Yeah.
And also, you talked about the use of gold, right? What other colors do you use in this art exhibit, or what colors are most important to you and why?
I love that. Well, gold for sure. Southeast Asians love 24 karat gold. It wards off evil. I also think about when a lot of refugees were leaving Southeast Asia and trying to go to refugee camps, they had gold because they're like, how are you going to have money, right? Like you have gold that you know you can sell and sustain yourself. So I like that idea a lot. I remember going to temples, you see like gold statues of Buddha. So there's multi-layered reasons why I like using gold. And then the other color, of course, is pink, like the pink donut box I love so much. So those two things. Yeah, those two colors.
Your art, is it just for people who are Cambodian or Asian and want to learn more about their history? Or do you also hope there's a group out there who doesn't know about this, who is maybe more European or part of those people who are the takers that can learn about their own history and why that was wrong?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I mean, I'm undeniably of Cambodian heritage, and so the work is going to be part of who I am. And so, yes, you know, I foreground the cultural heritage of Cambodia, but it's not just for Cambodians, right? But it also addresses Cambodians all over the world, like you said, resettling in the United States and Australia, New Zealand, everywhere. So it serves that purpose, but also because, like I mentioned, Cambodians are very welcoming. Like when you go to Cambodia, they're so excited that you're there to visit, you know? And as I mentioned, a lot, like Angkor Wat and a lot of the temples and artwork are World Heritage Sites. So yes, they are Cambodian, they're in Cambodia, but they're not just for Cambodians. It's really about us having shared stewardship about culture, and I feel like especially culture that was almost erased because of colonialism and war and genocide. And so for me, there's multi-layers, right? Like, of course you can, as a Cambodian or Cambodian American, relate to the work. But if you're interested in repatriation, you can be into the work. If you like donuts, you can be into, you know, so I think like the work has a lot of different places of access for people to relate to. I just don't think everyone would be able to relate to everything. That's just impossible. And I tell my students in making art, don't aim to make universal art, because then your work would be completely watered down, right? Like be very specific about what kind of work you're making and the people you're serving. Yeah.
And as an educator, what else is important when you discuss these things with students and making their own art, besides making sure they're in it in their own culture?
Thank you. Two things. I always make sure I meet my students where they are. I don't try to make them like me. I don't support them through, you know, a narcissistic point of view. And the most important is like, why do I teach? Because I love my community. I love students, you know, and I feel like no matter what, that's where it comes from. You know, when educators, academics, and administrators disagree on policies and solutions, the question is, how is this serving our students? That's always the question that I ask when we make decisions. And when I say serving students from the place of love. And I always try to practice that.
And circling back to the title, you talk about the many different worlds of being a refugee, but also what other worlds do you live in as who you are?
Thank you. So artist, educator, and I'm a mom. I love being a mom most days.
Yeah.
It's such an incredible, undescribable experience, being able to carry life in your body and letting that life go and giving that life so much love and hoping that that life will give love back to the world. And so that's my most important job.
How do your own kids connect to your art, or how do you hope they will connect to it in the future?
I didn't expect this because I am that mom similar to my students, right? Like meet my kids where they are. Like you are who you are. I raise you this way, but ultimately you're going to be who you are. They want to be artists.
Oh, that's amazing.
I know, I just never expected that. But two very different forms of art. My older son makes rugs and tufts, you know, and right now he's making rugs of rap album covers, and then eventually he wants to shift it to social justice messaging. And then my younger one loves to draw and sews and likes fashion. So he thrifts and repurposes and cuts up worn clothes and comes up with his own design. So I'm so proud that my sons are creatives too, and I hope they don't feel eclipsed by me, but supported and loved by me to be who they are as artists in their own right. That's what I hope for.
I love that they seem so supported by you and just inspired by everything that you've been through and that you do. So that's incredible. I was wondering how you felt when the exhibit opened yesterday.
I wanted to cry. I mean, ask Seha. You know, the best part, it was led by Seha and Jasmine, but student produced. And it was like museum quality exhibition. I'm moved how loving and welcoming and generous the community has been. I mean, on opening night when I came, they were all lined up like Jennifer Hudson, a dance party or something, with food, nicely dressed, big smiles on their faces. I felt like the red carpet was rolled out for me, and and then when the doors opened, I got to experience the exhibition. It was breathtaking, and just felt like the students and staff really understood what I was trying to do, and I felt moved, like literally moved, and like try not to cry.
Part of the layout of the exhibition, in other ones that you've had, why is it important how art is laid out?
It's the same artwork over and over again, right? But it does make a difference, the way it's laid out in the space. Like when I originally made the works of the heads and the banners, it was in Luis de Jesus Gallery. They had like clear, what do you call it, a window on the ceiling. So there was like this very divine light coming in, and it felt very ethereal. Here, the walls were painted pink. So there's like this immediate, like, welcoming, youthful kind of environment, which I think was very smart. And then like the heavier stuff sunk in, and it was more intimate. Like that gallery is very intimate. And so, the way that the work is curated, laid out, and the space changes the work completely.
And since we're a radio station, I was just wondering if you had to create a soundtrack for someone viewing it, what couple songs or artists would you pair with it?
Classical Cambodian rock and roll from the 60s and 70s. The gallery has it playing when you go in. Like Sin Sisamuth, I mentioned, Rose Sares Sotia. You can go on Spotify and, just type in classical Cambodian rock and roll, and that's the music that's most inspiring.
And then also, do you have any films or other media that you recommend that have inspired this?
Oh, so many. There's a great play called Cambodian Rock and Roll, if you're into plays. Film-wise, Riti Pan, who Professor Jaime Perez teaches about, is incredible. His is more documentary and it's more historical. That's a really great one. And oh my gosh, it's skipping my mind, but there was an animation that was released. I think it was called Rua, R-U-A. I could be wrong. Y'all can check on Google. That's a really good one. There's so many. A hard one is The Killing Fields from the 1980s. And the lead actor is the first Asian American to win an Oscar. And what I find ironic is he's acting out a part that he actually lived out in real life, which is surviving the genocide. So that's a very classic one if you want to learn about Cambodian and Cambodian American history. Yeah.
And if anyone wants to learn more about their own history, whether they're Cambodian or a different type of Southeast Asian, how do you recommend they best do that if they don't know where to start?
Talk to your parents.
Talk to their parents.
Yeah. Talk to your family, right? Your parents, your grandparents, your aunties, your uncles. I mean, the most important history is the history that you have lived and your ancestors have lived. I know it's very complicated because some people are either adopted or have bad relationships with a bio family. Then find your community, and that's people who have your shared cultural heritage, and maybe they have the grandmothers and aunties and uncles and cousins that they can share with you. But history starts
I mean, as a student here, it's amazing to have you here. I love seeing like all the posters all around campus and even like other places too. It's just so cool. And having spent my own time to like learn about you and your story is just, it's been a blast. So thank you for spending your time here with me today. If anyone else wants to follow along with your art or your story, how should they find you?
I have Instagram, so it's at Function, so it's PHUNGXION. You can do that. I'm represented by Luis de Jesus Los Angeles, and they have a website. You can go to that. I also have a website. It's www.phunghuynh.com, so PHUNGHUYNH.com. And I haven't been good about updating, but it's there.
It's okay. There's many methods, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me here today. And thank you for watching Studio One-on-One on Hornet Radio. I've been Lily Mashburn and Phung Huynh. Go check out the art exhibit, and thank you so much for watching.